Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, a man trying to find a crack in the door to let the light back in.
Tim Longo.
Why is there a door in the ocean that's not a lake? It's an ocean.
I don't know, man. I thought that I was hoping. Yeah, well, I went on a journey.
You did. So we finished the main game of Alan Wake last week, but we decided to tuck into the DLC this week, which I had played before as well, back when I played it 4 or nearly 5 years ago. Those I actually found the DLC probably more memorable than the main game, sort of in particulars. I remember the main game in broad strokes and a couple of specific moments. You know, the starting part on the island where she disappears, the diner, a lot of the stuff at the very beginning, and then like the place where he goes to where the doctor is, playing with his mind.
The lodge.
The lodge, yeah, exactly. I remembered that pretty well. But there were whole sections where I was playing. I was like, oh yeah, I remember this when I was playing it, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you. But the DLC was all very memorable because, it's fun to be able to take your engine and then just like twist it to do all this weird stuff, or maybe to do more with it than you could in the main game because it wouldn't have fit because he wasn't trapped in the dark place yet. So they can just kind of I don't know, really push it. I appreciate that a lot. And I do think I don't really know where Thomas Zane is in all of this. I feel like what happened was he basically freed them to go to their own maybe parallel universe where they didn't.
I think he's stuck in it.
You think he's...
Well, I feel like the suit is implying that he is stuck in the dark place as well.
Oh, I think it's to protect him while he's making contact with...
yeah, okay. Yeah, but... Yeah, see, now I'm kind of...
But then he was in it before, right? I mean...
But the balance, right? There's the whole thing where he didn't bring the balance, and there's actually a whole thing, and there's a thing in American Nightmare where they talk about that too, right? Because he
didn't balance the story, right?
He didn't balance it right.
He asked for too much.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it's a good question. I think it's a good, interesting question that probably has an answer. But where is he? I guess it's fair. There's maybe an interpretation where he could be in it or not, but if he's not, then yeah, where?
Well, if he's in it, I think the problem is we're deep into the like metaphysics of Alan Wake already here. If he's in it, then how could he be trying to lead Wake out? Right? I mean, that's what he's ostensibly trying to do is pull Wake far enough out.
He may know how to get out, but he just can't get out himself.
Can't get out himself. Yeah, that's possible.
Maybe. You're talking about the lighthouse, essentially.
Yeah, well, just...
Or getting back to the cabin.
Getting preventing him from going deeper into the darkness.
Yeah. I felt like... I mean, we talked about it last episode, so I think, I've already verbalized my... hope for more answers. I don't need them to be on the nose, but just like, or my hope for being able to understand everything better, which is like a weakness of mine for sure. As we talk about with lore and all that kind of stuff, I want to see all the connection points. The DLC felt like it should have been part of the main game to me. Now, there's some caveats. One is we were in the era of DLC, smack in the middle of it, I think, when this game came out. And so the concept of doing a publishing deal or doing thinking from the beginning or even halfway through development of like, oh, hey, we need some DLC. What are we going to do? We have this, or do we do it? Of course, we may never know, or maybe they've said, but I don't know if we'll get a guest on or not. But was it planned to always be this way or not, or was this taken and turned into DLC, even though it was potentially sometimes they're considered to be part of the original game or something. Not to say that the ending wasn't, didn't have some amount of closure, because Alice does escape, et cetera, in the main game. But I definitely felt, in fact, in the main game, it even says to be continued, I think. And so I felt like there was a wanting, I didn't want more at the end of the game. And then when I got into this stuff, and you had given me some clues about kind of where they go kind of metaphysically or sort of like, surrealistically. So I was excited about that, because the end of the game, the main game, did have some of that stuff, and it was just, they just scratched the surface. And so when they really went full on this, like the lighthouse stuff, and I don't, cart before the horse it or whatever, but just the fact that they use the words mechanic again, that's a player motivated thing that you actually.
Oh yeah. I have a lot of notes about that. Was my favorite part of this whole thing is how that became so mechanically interesting. Way more than I didn't actually remember that. I mean, I remember they used the words a lot, but I didn't remember that there were actually some variations that made it mechanically robust, I would say.
Well, and it's also a better marriage of mechanics and world building and systems, because you're using the flashlight, which is something that, to be honest, like in the main, which I'm going to have a lot to say because I played American Nightmare, and there's enough of a contrast there to talk about. But in the main game, it felt like the flashlight was a forced metaphor for the whole light dark thing, forced into the mechanics of it, but almost like a chore for the mechanics, and even kind of like not even always that clear, no pun intended, about when I was very successful or how long. They had the effects that sort of showed you when you were kind of done burning something, and then the audio was really good in that regard, but it just always felt too imprecise and like a step along the way to get me to what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? Like it was just kind of like a chore for me. But when you put the word mechanics in there and the word objects in there that also have context and meaning, and all you're doing is shining light on them. There's not this sort of like shining light and then having to shoot them as well. I don't know. It just fit. It worked really well. And it was a great partner to the end of the actual game. So I felt like almost like the main game was, and this is going to sound too critical, I think, but the main game was a proof of concept for everything I've played since the main game, including the DLC, and definitely including American Nightmare.
I could see that. I mean, I think that they were, as we talked about, they were trying to figure out how to tell the types of stories they wanted to tell, right?
Yeah, they were
pushing hard in different directions. I mean, they do that again with Control, and apparently successfully with Alan Wake 2. They kind of figured it out, and they know how to do it pretty well. And so that, I think, is why that's getting so many good reviews. I think they now really have a sound footing for how they build stuff. And they probably learned some stuff from Quantum Break as well, which I, as I pointed out, I haven't really played. I just scratched the surface of that one. So I think that you can see them stretching and thinking like a little further towards, I agree that they are definitely kind of pushing forward. And I do remember that American Nightmare has learned some lessons, from the sort of negative feedback we would have given about this game, right, that we've been talking about. I feel like it does play better, is better controlled. He's not wobbling around in the woods, which as well, right? He's kind of in that, he's kind of in a town, right? It's more like he's in the town section of the game the whole time in American Nightmare. So
it's it's three discrete locations that are hypothetically in a town, but they're like mini open worlds.
Yeah, right.
They're very open levels. The structure is completely different,
Right.
and potentially maybe like another sort of baby step toward what they wanted the original concept of Alan Wake to be when it comes to open world.
Yeah, I mean, and Control is somewhat open worldy as well. Takes a while to fully open up to you, but they're late in the game, you can go anywhere.
Yeah,
in that massive building, so it's, and even below it in that weird, man, that game really had good control of stuff like scale and like brutalism and things like that, man. Love to, maybe someday we can talk about that one, because I want to play it again. Not so soon, I don't think, after playing it, but I'm gonna probably go back to it someday.
I think I'm gonna stream the DLC.
Cool.
Soon, yeah, because I'm on a, despite my criticisms, I'm definitely on an Alan Wake kick right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so for me, the thing that really worked in this, in addition, I mean, I like the environmental weird stuff that they do, like creating your path by shining the light on different words and just having it all be in abstract spaces and creations of his mind and all of this stuff, right? It's sort of like, it's even more of the sort of writerly process of like creating the world around you just from words. I mean, it couldn't be more on the nose than that. But the thing I really liked was the sort of evolution of what those words were going to be mechanically in the sort of in the progression. So it's like, well, first it's you shining a light on, you're going to get tools or flashlight batteries or whatever, which is like, oh, okay, fine. And then you go into the basement of the church, the crypt, I guess they called it.
Yeah.
And it's all one thing, but there's a lot of them, which is the boilers or whatever. And there's a blast, I think is the word. And I love that because it's like, okay, now you got to think about how to use these to your advantage. So you're actually walking around with your flashlight down a little bit, which of course limits your vision, which is, a little terrifying. Like you want to see as far as you can see, but you want to not point the flashlight at any of these things because you're going to need to use them. And then being able to use them pretty quickly, maybe it could have been a little quicker. But it's cool. I mean, everything, that is one thing about this game. Everything is a little delayed. Like you shoot something that will explode, one of those tanks or something. It's going to fizzle and then it's going to explode. You throw a flashbang, it's going to go toss out and there's going to be beat and then it's going to explode. And I think that gets at some of your concerns, like the fuzziness of things. Is like, I don't know exactly when that thing's going to happen. I mean, you get the rhythm of it eventually, but at least with these blast things, it's like, oh, I can see him moving. I can time, when he's going to get there to make sure there's a blast waiting for him, and use those to my advantage. And then they mix in different things where it's like, okay, now you're in an area where you don't want to hit everything because some of them summon guys, and now you're in an area where, wow, it's really tantalizing. There's all this stuff out there. It's better just to run through as well. So it's just a real mix of different, explorations of that mechanic, that I thought had a really nice progression. Still too hard, honestly. I played on easy, and there was that place after Barry is talking to you about how he's a reflection of you and you don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. You cross this sort of little rock bridge, and then there's just this huge field with all these different things in it. And that was where I kept dying even on easy. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like this game does not make easy enough at all. Which is something that is always a pet peeve of mine. Easy should be easy, not less hard. It should be easy. That's what the word says. Words are important. This game felt like hard, less hard, and slightly less hard. So I don't know. Anyway, what were your thoughts about any of that? Do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with you. I think that whether fully planned or not, they definitely came into their own understanding that, because I think I've been thinking about it because of takeaways. One of the, and again, not to beat a dead horse on this, but because I powered through American Nightmare in one session, basically, I didn't think of it really until after finishing American Nightmare that I think the core issue that I didn't voice well in the previous 3 episodes is it just felt like a game. Like, I love player agency. I think it's maybe one of the sole reasons why I play games. And I love games that embrace it holistically. And I think Control gets a lot closer to that, of course, for various reasons. And the core game, because of its structure and the way the combat worked and the way the story works and even the way the protagonist works from just a character arc perspective, I didn't really, it's like there were times I didn't feel like I was even playing a game in a way. I was just kind of going through the intestinal aspect of this world, and just like the main reason I wanted to finish, other than for playing for the podcast, the main reason that I wanted to finish was to see what happens, story wise, because I'm so intrigued by the world. But in the DLC, because of the word, now it's only a little bit more agency, but because they gave you this extra option to utilize these words or not, or choose when to utilize them. Even like if you wanted, tools or ammo pickups or resources, right? Like that's still a choice. So it just kind of like all kind of cemented of like, oh, okay, that's what I missed. And I definitely wouldn't want the whole game to be as abstract as the DLC was, from that sort of, again, surrealistic kind of, I'm stuck in the darkness, because it was a good like epilogue in a way to the ending of the main game from a story perspective. Because of course now he's in the darkness. He helped Alice get out, etc. Or he was responsible for her getting out. Princess is another castle problem there, of course, but
yeah.
And it comes up again, and they just can't. They can't. I don't know. American Nightmare is even worse, but but anyway, so it's just that one little extra layer. So I really enjoyed. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the metaphor in the DLC. I enjoyed seeing him navigate the darkness, and kind of the way that he interacted with Zane. And I guess I might be mixing up American Nightmare, but I think Zane gives you pages, right, as you go.
He does give you a few pages, right? Yeah.
So, and then we debated in pre-show about Zane, or no, was that not in pre-show? Was that in the actual show?
That was in the show, yeah.
Okay.
We're both very tired.
Yeah, so we're going to barely make it through this episode. Anyway, so regardless of some of the ambiguity about Zane himself and where he is and all that kind of stuff, and then let's see. So the first one was the signal, and the signal ends up in your apartment, right? That's where it ends. Wait, where does the signal ends? Because you get to Zane. I'm mixing up the lighthouse one because that's the writer one, right?
That's the writer where you end in the lighthouse.
You end in the lighthouse, and like even just using, maybe I'm just too on the nose with my metaphors, but I love the use of the lighthouse, and then going into the lighthouse, traveling up the lighthouse, and then coming out of a ladder that's the trap door at the cabin.
Yeah.
Was brilliant. It was so good.
Remind me a lot of that section in Silent Hill where you go down, 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 down in, I think not the hospital. Maybe it is the hospital, and then there's a point where you like go up like one flight of stairs and you're basically opening like a basement door and you're back at ground level and you're like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Same kind of feel. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also you get onto the island with the cabin, and then you see the lighthouse in the distance.
Yeah.
It's really good stuff. And so like as far as the world building goes and just the context of the story. So I guess, just the combination of that stuff, just like you said, they're leaning so heavily with the DLC into having fun being in the dark place. And then just adding this little extra layer of giving the player one other thing to do. Excuse me. I think some of the level design spaces were, like you mentioned, that open one, were a little bit more open at times. Some of the combat areas, at least.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about it more with American Nightmare in that regard too.
Well, we can move right on to that. I will say, I've been playing Arkham City New Game Plus. And I am very appreciative of more open areas for combat because there are some that are too tight, and they are very difficult when you don't get any of the signals. It takes away all the UI elements for the combat, so you can't tell when they're about to hit you. And
that's what New Game Plus does?
Well, it's also more difficult. So it's more difficult, and it takes away all the prompting. It's pretty tough. I'm nearly at the end, though, so I'm about to get to Clayface. But I've had combats where I'm like, I just keep trying the same combat for 45 minutes.
Wow.
Because it's that difficult. And then the feeling when it stops is so good.
Yeah.
But I'm so sore afterwards. Anyway, but yeah, I appreciate more open areas because it gives you room to move, and figure out, and Batman can move so well. It's like, I can actually find a way to use this space to my advantage. And then when you have no space, it's very frustrating because all the tools you have for larger spaces, they're no help to you at all. You have to just get good at reading everything that's happening all the time, which is overwhelming in a tight space. Okay. Anyway, I just had to get that in there.
Well, you've had some great feats of skill. It sounds like that. You need to celebrate.
Yeah, I do. Well, let's talk about American Nightmare. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit on pre-show. It started to come back to me a little bit more. I do remember the structure of it pretty well overall, but I did not. There were some particulars. I was like, I feel like Mr. Scratch was more in it and things like that. But I think it had further growth, for Remedy that you appreciated. So maybe we can talk about some of that stuff as well.
Yeah. I'm looking at my notes though, really quick on the DLC. I wanted to mention.
Oh, sure.
Like they had some clever, again, there was that one swinging, remember that pole, that light pole that had like a swinging light on it that you had to swing back and forth to get the light to shine on one of the words to reveal.
Oh yeah. That was at the
beginning of 2, I think.
I think so. Yeah. It was at the beginning of 2 because you were at the because the first one ended with you in the lodge with the doctor. Yeah.
And then
you escaped out of there. Basically, just at the start, you just basically left that building, I think, and went out into the garden area again. I love that they remix all this stuff too. That they just make it all connect in weird ways, and they reuse some stuff in good ways. Like there was a scene where the sheriff, you have that memory with the key, and
that was good. I mean, that's what makes me think that this was really DLC. Where they did add it to the experience, and that the main game was a complete package from the beginning. Because there is a lot of reuse in this.
It's almost all. I don't think there's much in the way of new. There's new mechanics, but adding words as your shine target when you already have the tech is about as low a bar as you can go, right? I mean, they're just spawning some stuff there, so it's pretty straightforward.
And there was the Ferris wheel kind of thing too that I thought was a great set piece, or the thing where you're inside the Ferris wheel.
Oh, inside the house, yeah. The house pieces
rotating.
Yeah. I got turned around in there. There was one point where I followed the arrow, and then just the way it was moving, I got turned around. There was just one spot that I had to do. I kept dying there because I was not going the right way, because I somehow would get turned around and go back out the way I'd came, which you never want to do. But it was, I remember, is because there was a door that was closed, and so I would I'm going the wrong way, because it didn't signal as a door well to me. But other than that, I really like that.
Tricky.
It's such a wacky thing.
But then you mentioned it with I mean, we talked about it with Zane a little bit, and then I'll go to American Nightmare. But I was looking at my notes. The last note I wrote down after finishing the second DLC, The Writer, was similar to the end of the game where I think I said no idea what this was about. That was my last note for it. And the frustration that I had with the main game, and then again with these, even though I like them, and I think they added to the sort of mystique of everything, and I did enjoy seeing him in the dark place. But I guess you already said what it was. But I'm like, I loved it. Was a really great moment when he got back to himself, because he foreshadowed that he had to do that,
right?
And then you get there and you see that it's the Alan Wake with the bandage on his head. So you actually, from the main game, you know that that's the right one and that you wake him up. But really all this was, I think, was Zane trying to prevent you from going deeper in the dark, because it's not like you get out of the dark. So, you know what I mean? Like this.
Well, he doesn't want him. He's the one that's in the cabin is going mad, and if Wake gets too far away from that, he's never going to come back. He's going to be insane in the dark place forever.
I see. So so he's basically saved.
He's saving him because Wake did him a good turn. Yeah, that's why I read that Zane and maybe Barbara Jagger, were somehow freed in this process, right? Even though they're not with in our world in a way, or in Alan's world
Zane?
that they're. Yeah, that's the part that I don't.
That's a good question. I did
really
fall
don't...
down a wikihole.
Okay,
which involved reading through
those. Those wikiholes are not really a lake; they're an ocean.
That is for sure. Excuse me. That is for sure. They're definitely an ocean. Because I won't go through it, but I was looking at all the connection points between the games, basically. Control and Alan Wake.
I see.
Like what references were what and stuff like that. Some of them are very small, but I feel like now I'm misremembering, but I feel like Zane was mentioned. There is something there. But anyway, so American Nightmare. So really quick to remind you on the structure, as you already knew about the sort of roguelike nature of it, the repetition. Right. Now, of course, this isn't, I don't think they even considered this DLC. This was a standalone product. There's an arcade mode apparently, which I didn't play, but it is kind of a roguelike structure a little bit, but with a story, which I thought was super interesting. And as a premium light kind of like price point, I bought it for like $9, but I think at the time it was whatever, $20 or something, or $30. So it wasn't a full, which I understand why. And so this was maybe some deal they made with Microsoft to do another Alan Wake game, and this was the result. And I thought it was a super interesting experiment. But despite, so there's 3 locations. You play those three locations 3 times. So location 1, 2, and 3, and then you played through those 1, 2, and 3, and then 1, 2, and 3, and then the game's done. But you repeat playing through these, and different things happen. Just explaining for the audience if you haven't played it. So as a developer, there's a side of me of like, okay, super efficient way to design the game because you're reusing these expensive locations to build, but you found an interesting way to make it justified in the story. So putting aside whether that was completely the plan or whether they had a limited budget and team and they, needed to find a way to be clever with their production resources, giving them the benefit of the doubt, I loved it overall. I thought it was super interesting and super clever, unexpected. And going back to my point about player agency, and I'll talk about the combat in a second, because the combat is largely like fundamentally the same, but they tuned and balanced it differently, and they added new enemies, they added new weapons. So they basically added things, I think, to it to make it more of an interesting, deeper combat experience. Even though it's not like, top of the heap when it comes to how fluid and stuff it is, but still much better than the original game. But the structure of it, because so it I was doing a little reading on this too. It's arguable whether the whole thing was a dream or not, because it's one of those situations.
It is a nightmare, American nightmare.
Yeah, it's American Nightmare. It might even be Barry's, but because it opens with Barry asleep in the motel. And then, but it's all about Night Springs, which I also loved because it's kind of a pocket episode in a way because, and then during the game, he re-explains that he wrote for Night Springs at one point, and this was one of the episodes. And this episode was called The Return, I think, which was alluded to at the end of the main game. That he now has to write himself back into existence or something like that, right? I think he talked about that.
Yes.
So this is maybe a half step I'm hoping a half step toward 2. But you're right. You're basically following Scratch, and Scratch has basically the way they've justified playing these locations over and over again in this sort of like roguelike way, because you keep essentially your weapons as you go through each time. So you are powering up, even though you're replaying the areas. And they're not exactly the same. Events change, and there's 3 other women that you save throughout this game, which is like, but also are sacrificed at the same time because you're replaying these areas. So again, not the greatest in my opinion there, but apparently Mr. Scratch, who is your doppelganger, has trapped you in a time loop, and he brags about it throughout. And he really isn't present other than in the TVs. But the greatest thing about the whole thing is that these levels are basically mini open worlds, and they actually have the pages, as you may remember, are your currency for unlocking weapons. And you can't unlock the weapons unless you have a certain number of them, but you can't get the certain number without going through multiple times, because they're either not revealed yet or what have you. So you'll find the 40-page unlockable combat shotgun briefcase in your first run, but there's no way you're going to get 40 pages until the last run. So it's still fairly like they control it, and there's definitely some. I didn't get all of them because I didn't do a completionist run, so I didn't explore all of the little open worlds. So I clearly missed some, but I did get enough to get that gun. But because it's so player focused, where I'm running around doing things in whatever, largely, I mean, there's still a linear sort of quest line, if you will, but I just had so much more control. I could choose what guns I wanted to unlock. I think I did play on the easy. Well, they just had normal and nightmare. They only had 2 difficulties. The enemies are much more variety, much more interesting. I actually liked, even though it felt a little forced, of course, I liked the time loop aspect of it, because you got to know these levels. It felt like you were in a Night Springs episode because it took place in Arizona, and
right.
He talks about how Night Springs is whatever town you want it to be or something like that, So it felt very Twin Peaksy in that way. And then the other thing is, I mean, we had Barbara Jagger in the main game, but I feel
bird's
like
leg cabin.
Yeah, I feel like she was almost too mysterious for too long. And in fact, I never got the Baba Yaga thing anyway, so it didn't really land for me. But the thing about American Nightmare is Mr. Scratch, if you're watching the TVs, which again are optional, you don't have to watch them. Of course, I watched every one, and they're FMV, so you have that actor. It's a different actor than the voice actor, I think, but you have, it's FMV, so you're watching these little episodes, but they're videos of Mr. Scratch talking directly to you, so they're very personal, and it's terrifying stuff. Actually, stuff I'm surprised they did, to be honest, like super M-rated stuff. But he's consistent throughout the whole thing. So you have a great villain who you vanquish, so like the arc was there, like it just felt like gratifying. You knew where you were going with it. And they kind of bring in the other thing from a lore perspective. which was nice. It's not required. I don't think it's required playing, but he talks about how long he's been gone. Alice talks about him being dead, and he's been missing for 2 years, apparently, when this comes out.
As long as his writer's block.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Interesting.
His writer's block was 2 years at the beginning of, when they were going to Bright Falls.
Yeah, so I wonder if there's more. Yeah, so there's probably some layering going on here that I'm just not fully grokking, but she makes him. Yeah, there's more. That's the thing about. I'm sure it's Sam Lake's doing, but there's more going on that I think on the surface you just don't get, because there's the 2-year thing. She has made a movie with footage that she had filmed of you in the past as an homage to you.
Oh, right, yeah.
That ends up being the weapon that you kill Mr. Scratch with at the end. But then she's in the movie at the end, and you have this nice, like, romantic ending with the sunset, which of course is another part of the dream. I think it doesn't really happen. I don't know. I just it's definitely flawed. It's a flawed gem, but I just was not sure what I was going to expect from it, and it really was not what I thought it was going to be. And I thought it was quite interesting and cool, and the combat was a lot more fun. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you experienced it. Yeah, I played it back in the day. I remember, I agree, I remember the combat being better. I remember the roguelike elements. I do remember, I don't know if I got everything, but I probably tried, because I'm like that.
Yeah.
But I liked it a lot. I mean, more of it's come back to me as you've spoken, and I'm like, oh, should I play it again? I mean, no, you should not play it again. What are you doing?
No, I don't think you need to. Yeah,
but that's cool.
Yeah. I applaud it. I mean, of course, maybe we'll head to takeaways in a mere second here, but I just think, maybe this is overstating it, but there's just nothing like a Remedy game. I don't know what that means exactly, but they take swings, and what's the phrase that you use that I always forget? Your reach is
exceeding your grasp.
Yeah, your reach is exceeding your grasp, or what have you. They swing for the fences, and they don't always hit all of the things that I want them to in the way that I want them to. But of course, everyone cares about different things. And Control, I think, is a great example of that. Just a brilliant game. But there's going to be flaws. But even with American Nightmares, who does this? Is the weirdest structure.
Yeah,
it saved them because they only had to make 3 environments, but those environments had a lot going on in them. They're pretty deep. Maybe this was some weird. Oh, and I forgot one of the most important parts. If you remember, and again, it goes back to the structure. With each of the times you go to one of these, you're basically you're replaying this time loop, right? And that's how and this is like a common theme in time travel fiction, right? Where you're gonna cleverly trick the villain because you're gonna go back in time and redo it the right way,
right,
or whatever,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so he gets better and better. But at the end of each of the levels, if you remember, you had to find these objects and then put them in the position that the book says that they're in. Do you remember that part where it's like,
no,
you go and you find the page, and then you read the page, and the page says the light was shining on the fire extinguisher, or it was late at night, and it was late in the summer. And so you have to change the calendar so it's the summer, and you have to change the clock so it's late at night. So you're basically, because he talks about this in the original game, as he has to make things, he has to rewrite the story, and he has to make things the correct way to win. But in this version, you're doing it yourself. You actually have to go and put you have to put the cassette tape in the radio and turn it on, because that's what the story needs. So it's just very cool because you're reconstructing these scenes, to make
Right.
it accurate, so you can fulfill. The
Yeah,
best
instead of him
proposal.
like in the original game, he does so much just talking. This is one thing I pointed out
I did
last
this
time
and
that
I did that.
exactly, and like I knew that I had to, and et cetera. And it distances you from the character because like we talked about, it just inserts this distance of like, okay, yeah, but I didn't know that until you just said that you knew it, right? So like,
Yeah,
it just kind of creates this barrier. But if they're going to directly integrate you into that process, then maybe they start to close that gap. I mean, I think that's, like I said, I think Nightmare is responding in a lot of ways to, flaws that they knew they had, that they were figuring it out. And I wonder too, if, because you mentioned Microsoft, I assume published Nightmare. They published Alan Wake as well.
Yeah, no, they had a deal with Alan Wake, American Nightmare, and Quantum Break.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe.
I'm wondering if they were
maybe timed, but
well, I was wondering if maybe they were doing the American Nightmare while they were trying to figure out the story for, basically doing long pre-production on Quantum Break because they knew it was going to be, whatever it was going to be. So you have this team that can make the stuff, right? And you don't need as much story, right? Because you've already sort of established that world, right? You don't have to figure anything out. Not a lot new, right? You already have the world to play with. So I think maybe it was just a good way to use, to apply the team to something, get a smaller scale product out, a $20 product, and let them kind of run with it. Maybe have some people who, step up to do some more design leadership and things like that. While creatively they were trying to figure out what this whole other weird big swing they were going to take was going to be with Quantum Break.
Well, to your point on leadership, one interesting note that I saw in the credits is that I believe, I'm pretty sure I have this right, Sam was maybe lead writer or lead narrative designer, narrative director or something on the original Alan Wake. For American Nightmare, he was a creative director. So he had, it was to your point, that is an opportunity often for people to step up into new roles, bigger roles. And I think he's been creative director ever since from that.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
But, so that's one example potentially. And other people had stepped up with him in that regard. But, and then also sometimes, they might have done a two Alan Wake game deal with Microsoft. And this was technically achieving that second game goal,
right?
That happened. That occurred with Bungie as well with Halo when they had a contract with them, and that's what Halo Reach ended up being, and to some degree ODST. Yeah,
gotcha.
So, yeah, just clever ways to to be creative and economical with how you build your games. To get a new product out there. So
cool.
Yeah, that was a nice surprise.
All right. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you decided to not to wake, but to continue dreaming. Let's do some takeaways, and I think we might actually then just call it. I'm so tired.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe just do that, and we can catch up the email next time. So yeah, why don't you go ahead? Lead off, my friend.
Well, this is an obvious. I guess they're always obvious, but I don't know.
Yeah, if you've listened to the episodes, know what we're going to talk about.
If I don't know if this is the best way to put it, but world building is everything, and that is maybe in parentheses for me, because again, there's nothing like a Remedy game. I think they're brilliant at what they do, and I really appreciate them for that. And there's certain things that I like to focus on that sometimes I miss, but there's nothing like them. And especially in the world building category that, again, vague memory of Max Payne, and there's still some references apparently to Max Payne here and there. So there's sort of,
well, yeah, the Alex Casey character is Max Payne. Yeah,
that's what I read that. But they didn't own the IP, so they couldn't call him Max Payne. Like, why not just call him Max Payne? You know, like
Right. They didn't own the IP anymore, so that's why.
So there's a reference to there's a reference in Control about like the literary cop and the real cop. Apparently,
right.
Max Payne is one, and Alice Casey is the other. But anyway, but the world building, like, because I'd played Control before playing Alan Wake, you know, you can kind of see this great lineage, and you can just see it. You know, you can see what they do in this game so well, and the world building is beginning. And maybe it did start in Max Payne, but I think really Alan Wake, it feels like, was the bigger step forward for them of like what they do. And you see it in Control, and I do want to try to play Quantic Break because I'm really curious to see how it translates there too, or if it does, or like what spin it is, you know, spin off of it that it is. But it kept me going in this game. Like, just being in the world was great. The world, the fiction of the world, you know, the story was interesting, and like I said earlier, that's what really pulled me through. And I wanted more, so they played American Nightmare, which was like a whole nother riff on it, but felt still appropriate, you know. So world building.
Cool. Well, just as a reminder for a similar sort of, you know, shot in the arm for a game that you should go back to, you know, that Moon Crash expansion for Prey.
Yeah, I know. Which is also apparently a roguelike kind of situation.
Yes, it is. It is. So, it's a very interesting structure. And I haven't played it either, and I want to. But I was thinking about it when you were talking about it earlier. Because they do that sort of stuff really well. I mean, they did some stuff for the Dishonored games as well, where they expanded them. So I guess my first one will be, you know, for me, the key ingredient in horror. And I will say, you know, Alan Wake to me is a successful horror game because I was scared. Like, I mean, that's the only measure for me. You know, if I'm not scared, then it wasn't a successful horror game. And for me, the audio is king. You know, we talked numerous times about how good it was, but when I played it the first time, I don't think it had the impact because I played, like, you know, whenever I would stream anything, I would play, and I basically play with one earbud in, so I don't know how stereo. It's so terrible. I should not play games that way ever, but I do. So there you go. And playing it in full surround was just it was totally eye opening. I mean, or ear opening, I guess. You know, it was so compelling. You know, I played, you know, like Alien Isolation that way as well. It's a game I referenced, and it's the audio that's the thing that cuts through to me. It's not even like a jump scare or anything like that. Although, you know, if those are accompanied well with audio, they might also work. It really is how unsettled I felt by everything, and it's in all the mechanical pieces. You know, it's the noise that happens right before they swing something at your head. It's the hearing of a whoosh coming towards you. Mm-hmm. Like I said, with the positional audio, I was able to pick that stuff out a lot more. So I think I actually had a better time with the game as well because of the audio. But it's even like when you hit a checkpoint, like hitting the checkpoint is a sound that should feel like, phew, and here it just unsettles me more. And, you know, it just, I'm never.
That like drum or
it's so weird. Exactly. And it just like okay, I guess that was good. And so for me, the attention paid to that paid off in a major way, especially on this replay.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That definitely kudos to them on that. I think their audio design is great, and it was great in Control as well. And I'm really happy that Alan Wake 2 is doing so well for them, and that it's, you know, I know it's getting some nominations and stuff, and so it's encouraging that they're on a good roll, and they've clearly found their identity. You know, not that they didn't before, but they've embraced it. I don't know. It's rare to have studios achieve that kind of stuff, especially as long as they've been around.
Yeah. I mean, when you can say, "Oh, that's definitely a Remedy game," in a good way, right? I mean, in a positive way, you've definitely done something. So,
My second one is a bit weird one, but I guess it goes with the first one, as they often do have partners. The importance of mechanics and the world coming together. So this is maybe a little bit more of a critical one in that, but it is a takeaway for me. And I think until I play games like Alan Wake specifically, which again was not the case with American Nightmare as much, that it's not until I play games like that are so focused on pushing you through the narrative, and then they have what I'd say is gameplay along the way to to get to the narrative, that it really just is so stark to me about how important it is to me as a developer to try to have those married together as well as you can, so they feel like they're really good partners to each other. And I think that the concept of the flashlight and the guns, and there was aesthetically and symbolically there was a lot to like, and it did feel like it fit within the world and what was going on. But it just never felt good enough to me to feel like it mattered enough, and it often felt, I know that, like you said, it does scare you, and you do, it's hard, and so you have that sort of that tension you have in survival horror games where dying matters. But it often felt unfair, or I missed something, so I really need those things to go together well, I think, for the whole package to feel right to me. So just now, I'm definitely not saying it's easy.
yeah.
So that's not part of the statement, because it's very difficult to do.
No, I mean, obviously it's not easy. They're figuring it out here, and they're getting better with it every game.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. They get to iterate on it. Yeah.
And
they're getting close.
I mean, that's part of what makes it a Remedy game, right? So, they just hadn't quite figured it out here. Yeah, I mean, I think, to piggyback on that, I think everywhere. I mean, I talked about creating distance, but I think that happens with other mechanics. Like, you find these pages, and it's like, okay, so now you stop and you like go into the menu, so you can hear the guy. Like, he doesn't just read it. You're like, why wouldn't he just read it? It's like, so that you could just keep going, and like, it's that kind of weird friction, unnecessary friction, that feels strange. I guess maybe you might want to read them in order or something like that, but in that case, just put them in order, or just reveal them in order, or something, right? I mean, anyway, it's good stuff to do there. Mine is, I just put go for the mind bends. And I guess this is sort of similar to your swinging for the fences. I think they really push in strange directions for their stories and not common ones, I think that's really great. I mean, I think that's something when they let go of Max Payne, they actually freed themselves to do. I mean, Max Payne is the kind of the most grounded of the things that they've done, right? It's a running around with a shotgun, basically, and bullet time, and you're a cop and getting revenge. It's basically, an 80s, early 90s B movie,
Punisher.
Right? Yeah. Punisher or Commando or, whatever. I mean, it's just, but here, because they're stretching for something a lot stranger, it gives them so much room to play in. The Night Springs tie-in of this Twilight Zone like thing, I mean, you see tons of it in Control with the crazy puppet kids, and like they really push things because they go big on the story. I mean, and they're not doing common stories, and that's going to make it a little trickier to execute on. But hopefully by now they've figured out how to do it better. Maybe it's some part of their process to like spend the time to figure that out early. I would hope so. I think that's probably the case. Or maybe they just have long pre-production, and they try to, do other things with their team at that time. But anyway, I mean, I think that they just, going big on these story spaces and the world, I guess, as you'd say, really allows them to achieve a lot more and really come up with something unique. And I think that that's really commendable. And it's what I think of when I think of their output.
Yeah. Yep. It's I'm glad we finally. I feel like it's taken us too long to get to a Remedy game, but
we say that about literally every series.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
At least we're consistent.
Yeah. I can't believe we're only now getting to a
Nintendo game.
A lot of studios out there. Well, Nintendo we got to pretty early.
Yeah, and many times. Okay, my last one is snarky and weird at the same time, maybe, but
so like you.
Yeah, sure. It is,
or like me.
Maybe more you. Yeah. Physics matter, but they don't have to. And so it's a bit of a catch-all, but it has two prongs for me. One is the character stuff that I talked about, and I guess I'll just throw in the 3 Cs, all three of them in there. But they embraced physics in their engine at this point. It was an era where I think a lot of people were trying to find the right way to do it. It felt like it seemed like the right thing to do. Having gone through it myself as well, it seems like the right thing to do because it's like physics. We're figuring this out. Look at this physics engine. We're going to implement this physics engine into our engine. It's going to be great. And then you're like, oh no, we implemented this physics engine into our engine.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with it? Or should we have done it? And so this is a funny game because like the characters uses physics, even to just mantle is physics, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and it's very like we're getting close to. There were some times when I'm like, this is Trespasser happening right now. Because he's like trying to like wobble up this ledge.
There are times where I would shine the light on the words for like tools and a bunch of things would spring into existence in the air and then like they'd fall and two of them would tumble off a cliff. I'd be like,
oh yeah, all the time.
Why would you do that?
Yeah. Well,
what are you doing?
Yeah, but even just like him wonkily getting up on top of something,
yeah.
Or jump. They had jumping puzzles, which is like, this is not, don't know what. But then also they embraced physics in some of the, the way they use the enemy stuff, right? Like with the possessed items. So I guess the point is there's a time and a place and it's exciting to use new tech. But I think as a takeaway, something that I'm reminded by is when it comes to something like the 3 Cs or whatever, sometimes it's better to just embrace physics in some places, but not in others. And just, player control and the player feeling good about what they're doing in the game is more important than using some of this stuff that technically I think people think is gonna feel more realistic or something, right? Or feel more grounded because it's physics based or something. Or he's gonna feel more like a real person because he's using physics to do his stuff. But at the end of the day, you still have to tune all that stuff. It still is fake, so you have to make it feel good. Sometimes just it's better not to. So yeah. It's kind of the be careful what you wish for. There was a funny moment that scared the heck out of me in the first game. It happened to me in American Nightmare again, but I kind of forced it to happen because I wanted to see if I could. There's the bookstore in the main game in the town. Do you remember that at night? There's that one bookstore where you go through it.
Right.
And you go to the top floor and there's nothing up there. There's no like even collectible, I don't think, but they let you go up there. And so I went up to the top floor. I was like, there's got to be something up here. And I went between two bookcases and I took damage, like a lot of damage. Right in a quick moment. And I was like, there's something attacking me. It was a chair that was that was on the ground between these two bookcases that I just lodged myself in there the wrong way and took all this physics damage. And I was just like, oh man. Game development, great.
Yep. Don't we just love it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Common problem back then. It's still possible to have problems like that now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got Batman into some positions where bad things happened in City. Nothing too off the wall, but yeah, definitely something like that with taking a lot of damage. Mine is also character focused, and it's another takeaway that I think that they learned and got better with, and that's your characters still have to be relatable.
Yeah, that should have been one of mine.
You still have we've talked about the kind of barriers that they put between you and the character and how that doesn't help, but he's also a jerk, and he's like, it might have helped if there had been more, like, they're trying to make him seem more sympathetic because Alice has this fear of the dark, right? And the problem with that is it just does that at the expense of making her seem weak. Mm-hmm. So it's like this patriarchal thing as well. Like it's just like, oh, so it's even that. Like he's just gross in every way. As opposed to, like, you don't see a lot of that relationship being truly loving and supportive of each other.
No, there was even that one scene.
It's all very one way, like her.
Yeah. There's, I think this is in the DLC, not in American Nightmare, but there's this one scene where,
he's angry at her, and she's like putting stuff in the fridge or something.
She's super pissed at him, and she basically calls him on all of this crap of like, you're this entitled white male guy that I have to take care of, and is always, like, she just rails into him. Yeah. And I was like, yes, Alice, finally you're saying what we're all thinking, and this is what I was hoping, was hoping that it was going, is that that's actually the crux of all of this, is that Alice did leave him, and she didn't go. That's where I thought this was going, to be honest.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that, but that she didn't go to the dark place. She was like done with this a-hole, and then
like you go off to the cabin and write your book.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would have been great. But then right after that scene, he's like, oh, I'm not going to believe that. That's just the dark place talking. Oh, that's just some talk. That's some toxic behavior.
I will say they pay off on that later with the scene where he's sitting with the Hartman, I guess, in the spotlight.
Hartman.
And they're
Death Stranding, sorry.
Yeah. And they're listening to the tape recording of her, and he's saying all the right things, and then and he again says, well, that's not real. But then later, tying it all together towards the very end, he's like, I've had to face some things about myself that I'm not proud of, basically.
Yeah. I don't know if I wouldn't call it a payoff. I think they tried.
I think it's clumsy. Yeah. And again, but I think like the whole, DLC is about him facing up to, his reality, in some way. And I think that's a deeper part of his reality. I think it's not fully paid off, but I think they're trying to get there. Like, I think they know these things, right? And they're trying to find their way to it. And they're just, still learning how to do that. So
I will be very interested to see what they do in 2 when it comes to his character. I hope, because of the new character, Saga, I think is her name.
Yep.
I hope that he is not an empathetic character in 2. I'll predict it here. I think they need to shine the light on him being a freaking a-hole and lean into it.
Wow. Well, we'll see. I mean, it's half him and half her.
Yeah, I know, but that's okay. I mean, if you get to play as an antagonistic character and a protagonist, I like that kind of stuff, where
gotcha.
Where, I assume she's going to save him, which is also
I would not make any assumptions. I don't know.
I guess I shouldn't, but I hope I'll say.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, those are our takeaways on Alan Wake, and Remedy, I guess. Sort of a referendum on Remedy, but yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep playing their games. I'm very curious about Alan Wake 2. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I've got Joker and his thugs to beat. We got some email this time that we're not going to get to because we're both burning the candle at both ends, or I don't know, your candle is sick or something. I've lost control of this metaphor again. I'm not the writer. You can shoot those emails to devgameclub@gmail.com or on the web at devgameclub.com, on Twitter, I guess, at devgameclub. You could at least, I don't know, at me there, and I would probably respond. Tim occasionally twitches at twitch.tv/
at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
There you go. We have a fan-run Discord. There'll be a link in the show notes. We've got more than a Pokedex there if you want to come by and say hi. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo, our merch store, and the setup and some of the administration of that Discord, as well as its many bots, are by Mark Garcia. Have fun with your Stephen King fan fiction NaNoWriMo this week, and good night.
Good night. And I was like, there's something attacking me. It was a chair.